Hey everyone, James here, and today I'm going to be focusing on building a Shard TCG deck. Throughout this video we're going to be going through the ratios of spells to creature cards, as well as what types of spells that you should have, and the amount of different level creatures that you should have. For people who don't have a clue about Shard TCG, I'm just going to run over some basics now. So during your start phase you will gain 1 Shard. This can be used to summon 1 Shard level creatures. And in addition to the 1 Shard, you will gain 5 mana. This happens every turn. Your opponent can't influence this. This is your resources to use with Shard TCG. Now your 5 mana can be used to summon a variety of different spells. These are some of the staple spells that I would recommend in a Shard TCG deck. We have the Reaper's Mark, which costs 3 mana, as you can see. Bind to a creature. When the bound creature is destroyed, the owner of the binding spell gains shards equal to the bound creature's shard cost. Now this spell is a good way of earning extra of these shards. Now these shards are important for summoning creatures, which we'll get to. We've also got Chained in Thorns, which is good for inflicting wound. We can cover that. We've got Blood Offering, which is a ritual spell. We'll go over the different types of spells as well. We've also got channel type spells and multicast type spells, as well as just regular cast spells. Now your mana isn't just your spell power, it is also your draw power. So say at the start of my turn I want to draw 2 cards. It would cost me 2 mana. That means that I have 3 mana left to cast spells this turn. If I wanted to be a bit more adventurous, I could take away all 5 of my mana. This means I have no spells to cast this turn, but now my draw power is 5. So now I have 5 cards in my hand, and at the start of your turn it's really about gauging what you feel is the best for you, whether you need more draw power or you need more spell power. Now we will revisit spells in a bit, but right now I want to take a look at creature cards. So right here we have the Neck. The Neck is a great 1 shard creature, so it'll cost 1 of these to summon. And for people who aren't familiar with Shard TCG stats, I'm just going to bring the Neck up to here. So what we have here is we have an attack, which is symbolized there. We have a counter, which is symbolized there. So now we can see that the Neck has a low attack compared to a high counter. And the middle number there is, you've guessed it, it's the Neck's health. So this is a great little starting card, and its effect is very independent to itself as well. When this creature damages a wounded creature, inflict +1 wound to a wounded creature. Now in Shard TCG we have a wounding action effect, which is attached to the Neck's counterattack. So when the Neck decides to do a counterattack, if the creature survives, it will leave 1 perma damage, when usually the health would be reset at the end of the turn. Now you can also see that the Neck has a title. This title says Cloaked. This means the Neck cannot be targeted when it is in a ready position. It would have to be in a resting position, and the usual time a Neck would be in a resting position is just after it has performed an action by either attacking or countering. Now in Shard TCG, the Neck is not the only 1 shard creature we have. We have a wide variety of creatures such as beast cards, aberrations, arachnids, golems, and many more. Check them out on shardtcg.com. You'll see that we have so many creature types, but today I want to focus on these creatures. The first up is the Kobold. Now the Kobold has a great little staple effect, which I think a lot of people would love, and if you're opening a Shard TCG pack for the first time and looking to build your first deck, I would recommend having one of these in your deck. So the effect name is Allied Front. When this creature is summoned and there are more opposing creatures than allied creatures, you may free summon a 1 shard creature. So this is a great way of getting this creature out for just 1 shard. Now we have 0 shards, but if your opponent has multiple creatures out on the field, then we are allowed to free summon an additional 1 shard creature. So for the price of 1 shard, we've got out 2 1 shard creatures. I think that makes an excellent starting creature. It can go in many decks, because you are always going to need 1 shard creatures just to get your team rolling before we can bring out the stronger type of creatures. The Crake's effect, on the other hand, is quite interesting, as it likes to consume mana. So remember the mana that we had before? we can actually choose to consume, let's say, 3 mana to the Crake. Now the Crake can convert that into strength, and it already has a decent attack there for a 1-shot creature. So now we can change this into a 6 attack creature till the end of the turn. It's very costly with the mana, but a very good starting deck. I would recommend people make a Crake rush deck. Instead of going with high level creatures, try to get these Crakes out and just throw as much mana as you can and bombard your opponent. Now if you prefer to be a little bit more defensive, the Frostweaver might be a better choice for you, as its effect is Ensnare. When this creature counters, one or more allied creatures may swarm and counter with this creature. So as you can see, the Frostweaver has a high counter, similar to the next stats actually. It's a 1, 2, 3. Except the Frostweaver's effect really works as a group, so if you can get 1 or 2 Arachnid cards out on the field, the Frostweaver really starts to come into its own, and is a good way of being a little bit more standoffish. And now taking a look at the Tezzletic, this is another creature that is very good in a group, as its effect is scrap parts. Basically, once this creature is in the graveyard, you can summon a new Tezzletic to the field by banishing that creature from your graveyard to the Void. The Void being a place where you can't get creatures back at all, so it is gone. So with this effect, you can summon 3 Tezzletics after one of your Tezzletic has been destroyed. So I find that's quite useful, and it's a good way of saving on those precious shards and manas. Now, a massive staple card of Shard TCG would have to be the Kog'Muska, and if you can get a few of these to put in your deck, they are very, very useful. So the Kog'Muska, as you can see, for stats, not very strong at all. It's not really going to cause much damage, but its effect, Demise of Knowledge. When this creature is destroyed, draw 2 cards. This is a good way of saving mana. If you can get this creature destroyed and draw 2 cards, that could save your draw phase. This means that you have the rare opportunity to use 5 mana spells and you still had a little bit of a draw phase, so a very useful card. I find that if you've got a little gap in your deck and you're not sure what to fill it with, a Kog'Muska is always handy. Now here is an example of a 1-shot creature that does need a bit more support, the Ghoul. Now its effect says Dormant Pathogen. When this creature destroys another creature, you may free summon a creature of the same species as this creature from your graveyard. Now when we say species, we are referring to the name, the Ghoul. It's not referring to the creature type, which is undead. So it would be another Ghoul creature. So with the Ghoul, it is definitely worth having multiple Ghouls in your deck, as this naturally increases your summoning power, and the Ghouls can be a bit of a pest because they've got the wounding action effect right there. As you can see, infected bite and untainted scratch. So both ways they can start leaving permanent damage on the field, even though they don't inflict that much damage themselves. And in set 2, we're bringing out a subspecies of Ghoul which works with this effect. It is called the Cindered Ghoul. I find that the artwork for the Cindered Ghoul is much better than the original Ghoul, and the Cindered Ghoul has a really good complementary effect where when it is brought back from the graveyard, it can inflict a wound to a creature on the field. So when a Ghoul on the field destroys a Ghoul in the graveyard, you can bring back a Cindered Ghoul and it will inflict an additional wound to another creature. It's a nice little combination. I don't know if we'll be bringing out more Ghouls in the future, but I think maybe the next set it might be good to have another additional Ghoul. What that would be, I'm not so sure. If you've got any suggestions, please put them in the comment section. I like some cool zombie ideas. I think a lot of people like the zombie decks, so it's worth doing. So you've had your first turn, you've gained a shard. You haven't used that shard to summon any creatures. Second turn comes along, you gain an additional shard. Now we can take a look at 2 shard creatures, and these are two shard creatures that I would really recommend for any starter deck really. Like I say, if you're opening a pack for the first time and you're wanting to build a Shard TCG deck, if you see either of these creatures, it is worth putting them in a deck until you start to form a more themed deck, whether it's an undead or tied to an element such as order element. But let's take a look at these for now. Now the Reaper is another creature that is good for earning shards, as when it destroys a creature it can gain the shard cost of that creature. And the Carcarian is a good creature for when it is left on the field on its own. It can gain an additional shield to the worthy guard, which means it can tank a little bit of damage and help keep some field presence while you're trying to draw the right cards. Now moving on to spells, I want to start with the 4 most staple spell cards that you could probably find. These 4 cards are the harvest cards, and they have 4 different ways of generating shards. You can either convert 2 mana to 1 shard, or you can use Grave Harvest and banish a creature from your graveyard to gain 1 shard. You can sacrifice a little bit of life with Life Harvest to gain 1 shard, or you can banish the top 2 cards of your deck to gain 1 shard. If you happen to find any of these in booster packs, I would recommend putting them in because they really speed up your deck. So I know we've been talking about shard generation a lot, so I'm going to make this a little bit more exciting now, and I'm going to cover a few combat spell cards. Now the combat title is specific to certain spells that can only be used during the combat phase. The reason that we have that title is so that we're not just casting spells during your opponent's turn all the time, interrupting their flow of play. The idea is your opponent gets to do their turn. Anything that you are able to do, they are able to see because you'll already have it in play on the field, usually with something like a channel spell, which is a spell that stays out on the field and is channeled constantly. But with combat spells, these are spells that can only be used during the combat phase, and we are starting with a 5 shard massive one, Explosion. So target a creature, inflict 8 quake damage to the target creature and 3 quake damage to adjacent creatures. So this one is a bit of a splash effect type card. It does a lot of damage, very good to have in a deck. If this one comes up, I would recommend putting it in. It's just a lot of fun to shout Explosion as you're casting it. Winding Winds is quite interesting as it only inflicts 2 damage, but it can move a creature out of the way. This is a good little starter combat spell, as sometimes the positioning of your opponent's creatures are quite important, so it's nice to move one out of the way and it can disrupt flows. Frost Shards is an example of multicast, which I said that we were going to cover. So with a multicast spell, you can cast it more than once. So we can see it costs 1 mana. I can play this card, and if I have 5 mana, I can cast it 5 times and then the spell is gone. If I only have 3 mana, I can cast it 3 times and then the spell is gone. You still only play this card once, but then you can play it as many times during that one time and then it's done. So that'll do an additional 2 damage, but you can target multiple things and it's quite cheap. Fireball is a handy spell card to have in your deck, as it is a multicast as well, which the same as the Frost Shard, it can be used multiple times once played. Now the thing is with the Fireball is it likes to leave a wound behind, which is permanent damage, which we've already covered. Now Gravity Crush is quite unique as it is a binding spell. So a binding spell is essentially like an equip spell card in Yu-Gi-Oh! It binds to the creature and then it stays there permanently, targeting that creature that it is bound to. Now the reason that it can only be activated during the combat phase is to create a little surprise effect for your opponent. Your opponent goes to attack you, you activate the binding spell, and now your creature has a permanent boost. It's a nice little addition to have. Now not all combat spells are designed to do damage. Some are designed to take out other spell cards such as Mystic Decimation and Esoteric Barrage, and we also have an example of Stone Shield, which also doesn't increase damage. This one will increase defense. Now another fantastic staple card that I would recommend is Ultimate Tribute. Now this is a ritual spell, and rituals kind of work like quest cards in a way. The parameter is set and then you have to complete the ritual. Once you complete the ritual, you tend to get a little bonus, which is quite nice. So when a creature is destroyed, this ritual gains an offering. Once you have obtained 6 offerings, you may summon a creature from your graveyard. So it's a good way of bringing creatures back from the graveyard, and it's relatively low cost considering bringing back creatures from the graveyard is quite a strong effect. I hope people like that little example of a ritual card. I think it is something other people can add to their own homemade TCGs, whether it is in the form of a quest card where you can start to set yourself your own little goals within your TCG, saying, well, I have to do this so many times, and if I do that, then I'll get a bonus. And it's a good way of making the game a little bit more dynamic. So as you can see, Shard TCG has a lot of variety in terms of types of spell cards, as well as types of creature cards, as well as elements of creature cards. And there's a lot to explore. And what we covered today is only set 1, which is just over 200 cards in the Origins Shard TCG set. Now, my recommendation for when you're building your first Shard TCG deck is to keep the number low. Try to stick to 40 cards. I will go with a nice ratio of about 30 to 10, 30 creatures, 10 spells, or 25 to 15. Now, as for creature ratio, for 1 shard creatures, I would say about 13 1 shard creatures. You want plenty of low level creatures to be able to get out early to get a footing early game. 2 shard creatures, I want a lot of them too. Probably round it up to 20, and we'll go with 7 2 shard creatures. And then with your final 3 to 5 creatures, I would go 3 and above. Now with Shard TCG, you can go up to 5 shards, but as 5 shard creatures are quite rare, 4 is normally the cap. And there are plenty of strong decks out there that are only built with 1, 2, and 3 shard creatures. A 4 shard creature is really a luxury, so don't feel obligated to feel like you need a 4 or 5 shard creature in your deck. And as for spell cards, I'm not really going to go through the types of spell cards to what is essential. What I would just say is these type of cards, the harvest cards, the ones that generate shards, you're going to want a good few of them. So let's just say you're going with 15 spell cards. With the harvest cards, you can get duplicates of each. So the mana harvest is a very common harvest card. Life harvest I quite prefer, but I don't see it being used too much. I see a lot of grave harvest and not very much mind harvest. For me personally, I would go with maybe 4 mana harvests and a couple of life harvests and maybe a grave harvest. But I know a lot of people will go primarily grave harvest, but this can stunt you because you don't have anything in your graveyard early game. You have to be on a losing front to need grave harvest. Mind harvest is a bit more of a gamble because you don't know what you are actually giving up. It's the top cards of your deck. It's a little bit scary for some people, but I'm sure with the addition of some new cards that might benefit banishing cards from the top of your deck, this could become very useful. Now the only other thing I would cap with spell cards is channel spells. Channel spells remain on the field and they tend to be quite expensive. You want a lot of cheaper spells because you want to make sure that you have plenty of draw power. I would say no more than 3 channel spells, but it depends on your strategy because some channel spells like this one do resolve themselves, so they don't remain on the field all the time. Okay guys, I think you're ready to build your first Shard TCG deck. Try to find a lot of these fun little characters as they are quite useful. I know we didn't go into too much detail on some of these, but if you can see them right here, check them out on shardtcg.com/cards and you can see the details. Try to work out a deck yourself, and remember, you can always build a deck on the Shard TCG site. You just need to make an account, select deck builder, and then you can put your own deck together. We don't have anything on the site to be able to actually play the deck, but you are able to download the deck and use it on Tabletop Simulator, and you will also be able to view set 2 of Shard TCG, so you can add additional cards that I wasn't really able to show you today. If you found this video useful, don't forget to hit the like button, and I'll see you guys next time.